Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. Before we move into today's lesson, let's make sure that we're on the same. We've seen firsthand how much more is required to provide authentic leadership to a team than simply managing based on the authority that comes with a title or position. What we learned through more than 50 combined years of leadership responsibility is that taking the extra steps to serve people and earn influence will always produce results that barking orders never will. And if you stick with us to the end of the episode, we'll share how you can get a complimentary trial to our resource that we've built that's like nothing else you've ever seen. Now, with that in mind, let's get to work. This episode is in the first in the series on what's killing your profitability. Sunshine Daydream. Organizations of all sizes invest significant amounts of money and time and energy with the goal of really improving their processes and their hopes of becoming more profitable in those processes. As I've never met an executive who says, hey, I want to just improve productivity without having that goal of how do we drive profitability of the organization. Now, sometimes that's a goal of becoming best in class for the organizations. But let's be honest, sometimes their goal is just staying competitive or just attracting talent. How can we just stay in the fight and not go out of business? Because let's be honest, it's tough. Now, all too often, though, the things that can have the most immediate result on an impact on profitability, and quite honestly, as well as on the lives of the people involved, they're overlooked. Those things are often overlooked or completely written off because they're the things that are considered to be intangible. So what are those things? Those things, I believe, are the skills that are needed to build an organizational culture that really produces world-class results and makes the best people in our respective industries want to beg to be a part of our teams. Those skills tie back to a word that I think is misused far too often, and that word is leadership. Now, if you're responsible for the results of the team, whether that's a small department or a giant organization, there's never a shortage of issues that demand your attention or your time. Now, after more than 3 decades of experience, and I've worked through multiple different industries, there's one thing that I can share with absolute certainty. If you genuinely care about running a profitable company, the investment that you make into becoming an effective leader and building a team of solid leaders around you is going to yield a higher return on investment than any other thing that I've seen. And quite frankly, that investment alone will play a critical role in driving better results in any other initiative that your team puts in place, whether it be strictly productivity, whether it be strictly quality-based, whatever. When good leadership is in place, it impacts everything else. Now, one word of caution. Don't be that person who's got a title, whether that's owner, CEO, president, manager, whatever, and believes that automatically that makes you a leader. For more than 20 years, I've heard John Maxwell say that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Now, a title, it might carry a certain amount of authority to make things happen, but gosh, that's never going to yield the results over the long haul that we can achieve through the effective leadership that only comes from earning genuine influence with the teams around us. Now, the challenge is that choosing to lead through influence rather than managing through authority can seem harder on any given day. Now, if you'll hang with me though, I'm going to make a business case like you've never seen before for why making that decision to serve your team as a leader, as opposed to just a manager, will give you far more juice from the squeeze than you're ever going to get from that because I said so approach. And I'm also going to be work through sharing some personal examples and really laying out some steps that are so simple to take action on that you'll kind of question my sanity if you don't already. So here's my challenge to you before we really dive in to this first segment. Give it a shot. And see if you can prove me wrong. If you're willing to just pull a few ideas from what follows here in this lesson, as well as the ones that we build on top of this, and you turn it into the behaviors that your team sees from you on a daily basis. I don't believe it's possible for you to prove me wrong. The question really boils down to whether or not profitability matters to you and your organization. And I guess we'll see, right, on how you take those behaviors and what you do with it. So before we begin really unpacking any of the specific action steps that you or I would need to consider to capture even the slightest bit of that profitability that's lost due to poor leadership, I believe it's absolutely critical to quantify just what we're likely leaving on the table. Now, I mean, I've heard countless executives suggest that leadership is this intangible thing. So I'm going to take a big swing at the head of this whole myth right now, and then I'm going to try to land some solid body shots on each of the specific things that we focus on moving forward. But in this lesson, I want to call attention to an article I found from Forbes.com. It was called Leadership and What's It Costing Your Business? And it says, poor leadership is a financial cost. When you have poor leadership in management positions, it affects not only the morale of your business and the productivity of your team, but also your bottom line in your business. The profit line suffers from poor leadership. In digging through, I found another article on LinkedIn. It was called The Real Cost of Poor Leadership, that made this point before the author shared several personal examples that they had experienced personally. The author said, after a lot of research and reflection, it begins with the knowledge that cost isn't just monetary. When you look at the definition of cost, it talks about outlay and expenditure. Sure, there are countless examples of where the outlay or expenditure for leadership was millions, if not billions of dollars. Now, not so long ago, I was asked to speak to a group of business owners and executives in a specific industry, and the topic they gave me was of the value of non-technical personnel development. That's a really complicated way of saying those soft skills we talk about, right? The gentleman that contacted me, really, really good friend of mine, and he asked me about doing this. He provided me a list of 7 different topics that the group wanted me to address in 10 to 15 minutes as part of that particular committee's monthly video conference. Now, interestingly enough, of those 7 different topics, Cindy and I had written at least one lesson, most of which are in this Leading at the Next Level program, dedicated each of the topics. So again, he said 10 to 15 minutes, and I'm looking at, okay, we've got 10 plus hours worth of material addressing those 7 topics. And my goodness, I was glad I had several weeks to prepare, because condensing those more than 10 hours into something that I could share and really leave a lasting impression in such a short time took a bunch of work. Now, one key that I knew that I needed to really emphasize with that group, and I believe it's just important for us to keep in mind right here, is another stat that I found in a Harvard Business Review article a while back about the impact effective leadership can have on gaining buy-in and engagement from our team members. And you've probably heard me share it before. You're going to hear me share it again, because I weave it in later in this lesson. And it says, that effective leadership can earn that engagement. It says, to the level increased commitment from that effective leadership can lead to a 57% improvement in discretionary effort, which produces on average a 20% more individual productivity. Now, in talking with that group, the group of business owners and executives, I went on to explain that I've been involved in countless continuous improvement initiatives since 2000. So now more than 20 years, and I've seen companies invest tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, just for the chance of achieving a 3 to 5% productivity improvement. The primary difference, I believe, often really lies in understanding what to look for to really capture improvements in productivity. When we provide training for technical skills, when we do those continuous improvement events, we can generally see whether or not a participant applies what they've been taught. In many cases, though, we struggle to do that same thing for training on those skills that are perceived or labeled as more soft or intangible. But if we've got a shot at capturing even half of what that additional productivity that the Harvard Business Review article suggested, let's say it's just 10% additional individual productivity, by developing the leadership skills that we use with our teams, that's twice the impact that even the best continuous improvement project that I've ever been a part of really captured and sustained. And the best part of this is that the majority of the cost lies in our decision to take action on those perceived soft or intangible skills that are so powerful for the teams we need. We just have to be clear. We've got to have a clear picture of what that action needs to look like. So if we want to have any hope of capturing even the slightest bit of that profit that I just referenced, the profit that we're probably already just thrown away by not developing the most authentic influence we possibly can with our teams, and eliminating all the waste that's so often tied to miscommunication or misunderstandings, disagreements, etc. We need to have an extremely clear picture of the specific behaviors that we as leaders need to implement. Now, having a plan can serve, I believe, as a decent starting point. But putting it to paper, gosh, that's likely going to be the easiest part of that whole plan, is writing it down. If we're not absolutely certain of how we're going to take action, even the best plan, even the best thing hashed out on paper, it's not going to amount to much. Now, about a decade ago, I'm having a conversation with one of my mentors at the time. It was kind of a goal setting session. And he challenged me to make a list of the things that I really hope to accomplish within the first 10 years of our business. And as I talked through the different goals with him, he continued to poke and prod and challenge me on why I listed each specific item. And it really resulted in me crossing several of those things off the list entirely as he dug through it. And that was okay. Now, once I had a list that I felt like I could be really confident about, he continued to poke harder. And this time he was pushing me to picture what achieving each of those goals would look like. And he was adamant that I picture each future goal with the same level of specificity that I would have if I'm thinking about my favorite meal, which is usually like either Mexican food or this greasy, flat New York style pizza that the grease just drips down your elbows and so on. I can clearly picture that, right? Or my favorite vacation spot. For me and Cindy, that tends to be the Gulf Coast of Florida, where you can go chest deep in the water and you can look down and you still see your toes and the sand's white and it doesn't burn your toes. But he says, Wes, I need you to picture those goals with that same kind of specificity. But quite frankly, that was far more difficult than settling on the actual list. It was hard to develop that specificity. But guess what? It yielded far more results. Now, as I share this with you, I can honestly tell you that we've moved way beyond anything that I'd even considered listing as a goal back then. And I'm not saying that to boast or brag. We've worked a heck of a lot harder along the way than I ever imagined, and in different areas than I imagined. But I'm also certain that we would not have made the majority of that progress without having a crystal clear picture of what we were working to achieve. Now, here's why I share that story, because you're thinking, well, Wes, this isn't a goal setting session. We're talking about how do we capture profitability. All too often, we attend events, we read books, we work through lessons, and we take pages of notes. Unfortunately, that's where things tend to stop. We get back to work and we've got to dig our way out from the time that we've missed, and we're juggling all these urgent issues that keep coming at us. And before we know it, all those notes end up getting buried under a pile of other tasks on our desk that are just pushing and demanding our attention right now, and we barely ever get time to circle back to the things that we felt so strongly about in that moment. Now, having experienced that so many times ourselves, Cindy and I both, we've been really intentional about building steps into every lesson. And you guys that are regulars with us that have been involved in this program or other stuff we do, you know what I'm talking about this. We build those things in to make sure we help people avoid that same trap. And I always make the point that taking notes is great, but even identifying one specific action step that can be applied right away is going to deliver significantly more value than pages of notes that get stuffed into a drawer and you never look at again. Now, when we're doing this, I often poke even harder. And in the assessment that follows this lesson, you'll be challenged to really say, here's my action step, but what does achieving that action step look like? What result am I really after? So I can know if I even hit it. So gosh, we want you to be able to do that. When this is in a group setting, my goal is really, how do we provide each participant with tangible items that they can work with their manager or the owner of their business on, so moving forward they've got collaboration. In cases where we do specific one-on-one strategic leadership coaching with the individuals, we press them even more by challenging them to really detail their specific behaviors that their teams, the folks that they're responsible for, they're going to see them apply on a daily basis. How will they know it? Through by seeing their behaviors is how they'll know it. So we really dig into that. Now think back to what I referenced before about being able to immediately see how somebody applies that technical training we provide them with. If we expect to capture any of the profit that we're losing because of poor leadership or ineffective communication or whatever else, any number of the things that we'll really isolate and dig into later, we've got to develop a clear picture for what the behaviors we're putting in place are going to look like, both to us as well as to our teams. And we need to have that clear picture of the results that we're working to achieve, because I believe without doing this, we're simply ignoring the issue. And gosh, that's going to come at a cost too. So if we're not intentional about actively developing the leadership skills of each key individual on our team, the areas where we're likely hemorrhaging profit, I don't think they're going to have many balance. I think it's going to be far and wide. Even the leaders who are incredibly strategic in defining exactly how they'll implement each new skill that they learn, they understand that an investment is going to need to be made into the process, right? We certainly have to, we certainly have the option to neglect making that investment. And let's be honest, there's not likely going to be somebody standing and holding us at gunpoint to make us do any of those things. But the price, if we choose not to make those investments for ourselves, as well as for the leaders that we need around us on our teams, it's going to have a tremendous potential price too. I think that price is going to be far higher over the long haul. Now, in considering how much impact leadership or even a lack of can have on an organization's bottom line, check out the numbers shared in a 2016 Ivy Business Journal article I found. It was called the Rising Price of Bad Leadership. Now, again, it's a little bit dated, so circle back to 2016 in that era and picture the economy then. Bad leadership, it said, is clearly expensive. Fraud resulting from mismanagement at Wells Fargo, for example, has already cost the bank about 300 million US in fines and pre-settlement investigative costs, while wiping out something like 6 billion US dollars in shareholder value. Ex-employees, meanwhile, are seeking at least 2.6 billion US dollars in class action lawsuits related to the Wells Fargo corporate culture that rewarded employees who created multiple accounts for customers without permission. Well, I realize as I share this, guys, it's tough for most of us to wrap our heads around close to 10 billion on lost profitability just because of poor leadership. And honestly, I don't believe that those numbers even scratch the surface of the total impact that whole Wells Fargo scenario referenced in the article really had on customers that they should have been serving. Now, truth be told, at that point in time, Cindy and I had our mortgage with them. And just we fought. I remember it so distinctly. This is 10 plus years ago, maybe closer to 15 at this point, but whenever it was, I remember we fought with them. There was a specific billing error that led to processing in a short period of time our monthly mortgage payment 3 or 4 times on the same day. And it ended up hitting our account to the tune of several $1,000s that wasn't there, and we didn't see it. And each one hit finance charges and overdraft charges and all these different things. And it cost us thousands of dollars, and it cost us months and months and months through interacting with their customer service or lack thereof, until we were finally able to connect with a local organization and just move our mortgage entirely. It hurt our credit, and there was all these costs. Now, let me make you feel better. We did receive some restitution several years later, and if memory serves, we got a check for somewhere between $10 and $20 randomly that showed up in our mailbox, and it had some brief description about the class action lawsuit that was referenced in the article. Now, I don't think for a moment that impact, that's probably closer to $10,000 that cost us. I don't think for a moment that it was exclusive to us. I think there were many, many people that we'll never know about that were impacted that same way. And that takes that $10 million of profitability, because guess who won't deal with Wells Fargo at this point in their career? Anyway, and not a commercial for them, but that article, the IB article, went on to share when recruiting leaders and directors, organizations have long invested time and money to ensure that they're managed and governed by people with appropriate levels of experience and competencies. But all the time and money can be wasted when leadership character isn't given the attention it deserves, because costly failures in decision making can often be traced back to character-based issues such as closed-mindedness, impatience, lack of accountability, empathy, humility, and courage. Gosh, we've probably all seen that, right? We certainly have choices to make with regards to how we invest our organization's resources. We can write off the idea of leadership as being intangible or some touchy-feely thing that never shows up on a profit and loss statement. And I tell you to ignore them at your own risk. But it's not just you who's going to be impacted when you do that. So it's not really at your own risk. It's in everybody's risk in the organizations. It does indeed impact us, but it's going to impact us by we lose opportunities for capture and profit in so many categories. And it hurts the team members that we've accepted responsibility for leading. So moving forward, I want to look at some of the areas that we can really work to capture that lost profit in, and some specific steps, even while all of them won't be here, but the specific steps that we can take individually as leaders to really begin putting that culture in place to make sure not only we capture the profit, but we build a strong team that continues to move forward in any environment. Thanks for listening to the Leading at the Next Level podcast. Next time, we'll pick up where we left off by digging into the difference between education and application. If you'd like to go deeper into anything that we've shared here, or you need continuing education credits for your professional credentials, send us an email, admin@dove-development.net, and we'll be happy to hook you up with a 45-day all-access trial to our complete Leading at the Next Level program at no cost. This full program includes access to well over 100 hours of digital lessons, complete with slides and action-based assessments to really help you capture measurable bottom line improvements in your organization, and 2 live lessons each month with Q&A so we can help you identify the specific steps you want to take to lead your team more effectively.